Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, with Noah Guardado, Nova is the short film played at the Chicago Feedback Film Festival. It is a sci-fi mystery with laughs and robots. Those are your words, correct?
Correct. Yeah. That's the best way to explain
So
it.
tell me about, well, it's a simple tagline. It's a great idea. So tell me about, so you're from, it says you're from the south side of Chicago, right?
Yes. Yep.
So that's where
Yeah.
Comiskey Park is, and then Wrigley Field's in the north end, right?
Well, yeah, actually, exactly. So you mentioned Comiskey Park. That's in Bridgeport. Sorry, my cat's being kind of crazy. I am from that neighborhood, Bridgeport, actually. Yeah. So I was born and raised here on the south side of Chicago. And so I think a part of my mission for Nova was like, I just feel like in filmmaking, Chicago is one of those cities that isn't really highlighted as much as it could be.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought it'd be cool to sort of make something based in this future setting of Chicago. There's like hints in Nova where you notice it's almost as if the city's been built on top of it, like hundreds of years into the future.
So you're
Because yeah,
400 years in the future, 450 years in the future around, I guess, eh?
just about, yeah. I think I say it takes place in 2476.
That's around 450 years, right?
Yeah, just about, yeah.
So you wrote the screenplay. I'm assuming that there's a bigger idea here.
Yeah. When I Well, honestly, when I originally wrote it, it was going to be quite different. It was going to be about this character kind of stuck in like a simulation. And I didn't love that idea. But I was watching Cowboy Bebop at the time, and something just clicked where I just loved this sort of mixture between sci-fi and like jazzy noir. And so I thought, how could I like kind of tell my own story in this kind of world? Um, so we developed this kind of short little mission that this bounty hunter could go on. But now at this point, it feels like there's so much more to be said in this world. I think it'd be cool to kind of like in classic Star Wars fashion, maybe try to tell like a prequel about these two characters, more about how him and his old bounty hunting friend kind of like get together and like get to know each other and get more into that dynamic of that relationship. And yeah, I just love robots. I love Futurama too. So I feel like that whole aspect of machine and man coming together in making stories has always been like really interesting to me. So yeah, there's a lot more to tell in this world for sure. Yeah.
You want to basically make the audience laugh at the same time too, right?
Yeah. That's kind of something that kind of always comes naturally to me. I like telling serious stories and I like tagging into different emotions. I think that's like the whole part of art, right? Is to make people feel things that they usually don't usually feel on just on
Yeah.
like an everyday basis. But I'm a pretty goofy guy to admit. So I think it's hard for me not to throw that in there, whenever to kind of like give the audience a break and just kind of like have like a quick laugh. Yeah.
So you
That
have
that will
lots of kind of like stages, like there's that scene where the kind of like the I don't know what you call it, a ship or a drone kind of goes through the new kind of world that you've created
yeah.
for this film. And then like lots of staging. So tell me about it. This must have been a pretty, it's only 7 minutes, but it must have been a pretty ambitious undertaking to make this film.
It was, yeah, man. And it's definitely a labor of love. I want to say it took around 3 months for me to like finalize the script and then another two to like figure out locations and who I was going to have in it. And we only reserved like 3 days to like physically film anything. But then the rest of the work was done in post production, and I also did the visual effects for it. And I want to say it took around 6 to 7 months to finally finish all that.
So is
Um,
visual effects your thing? Is that something you're go ahead?
yeah, no, totally. I think visual effects was like my gateway into film, so to speak.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to be born in '99, so I feel like at that point there was already a good amount of like software available to me as like a kid. I remember when I was like 8 years old, I had this like little flip camera that I would like record everything on and then plug it into my mom had like a work computer that was like an old school Mac, but you could get After Effects on it. So I was like 8 years old, just like making visual effects, trying to make really silly movies. And that was sort of like the catalyst to be like, oh, I can like make my own films now, especially once I got into like 3D and CG and stuff like that. It was always like, how can I make a film, not necessarily by myself, but right now, because I feel like filmmaking is one of those things where it's so much fun, it's so great, and I'll always love it, but it demands a lot of resources, even if it's by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's why VFX kind of grabbed my attention, because I love the idea of making short little stories that are like kind of supported by it. So Nova was like that first big one where it's like let's actually tell this bigger story. Let's have a bunch of CG shots, a bunch of world building, and just see how it goes. So yeah. VFX I really enjoy.
So in the, I guess the bar scene, like
Yeah,
almost like a tribute to Star Wars in a sense.
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
you created those robots yourself?
Yeah, for the most part. So the one who's like the singing
You're looking
crooner.
for it? You're looking for the robots for in your room?
No, my cat's
Oh, your
messing with
cat. Okay,
me.
sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, so one of the ones I did make from scratch, he's the one who like is like singing at the beginning of that lounge scene. You can also see him like sitting like as our like main characters like entering that first world. Those other robots, I bought this like plugin for Blender where you can like custom make different robots by like kit bashing pieces together. Yeah,
Gotcha.
a lot of
And
fun.
yeah, so then like did you go to school for film? Did you go to film school?
Sort of, not really. Like growing up, I growing up, I did like Second City stuff, so like improv here in Chicago, and I did theater in high school. But in college, I went to NIU over into Cal, and I studied communications, but the emphasis was in media studies.
Mhm.
And so basically, media studies like reached across all these different branches of kind of like creativity. So like I took animation courses, I took some filmmaking courses. I actually took a film festival course as well, which was like really cool. We
There's a
basically,
film festival course.
yeah, that was probably one of my favorite classes I think I've ever taken.
Well,
It was,
tell me, what did you learn? I'm so
yeah,
curious.
it was called Film Festival Administration, and my school every year does a film festival called Reality Bites, and basically in that class you're just on the board of the film festival, and so we would get together like almost every day. We would talk about like timelines for the films, and then we would watch all these films that were submitted on Film Freeway. We would basically just discuss strengths and weaknesses and which ones should be in the lineup. And we also had the privilege of like creating like little like bumper shorts that were like advertisements for the festival. And I like, of course, like took the reins on that and made like weird Adult Swim like inspired stuff to like
Yeah.
advertise it. And it was a lot of fun. And I think ever since that course too, I met really cool people who I like still collaborate with today. So this has felt like a full circle moment for me for sure. Like getting into the festival and like winning best short compared to like when I was like literally like running one at one point. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
So you got the programming aspect, like the curating of the films, and then you also have like there's a marketing standpoint
Yeah.
in terms of like getting people in the audience and then kind of having a twist, I guess, right? Like that's me though. Kind of like what's the point of view of the festival? Like what's the thematic? What's the agenda?
You're right. Oh, for theirs or just like in
No, for
general.
any festival. I'm just
Yeah, right.
I'm the professor right now. I'm saying how the point of view
Yeah.
I would take the class if there was one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we had the opportunity to like give it a theme. I think we chose like 80s VHS sort of theme. Like we wanted to bring a sense of nostalgia to the audience. And I
Yeah.
think we did that pretty well.
That's a curating theme, but then there's I call it the macro theme. Like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to say? So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So basically, so then tell me about your lead actor. So is it Antonio?
Yeah. His full name is Antonio Villalobos. We all call him Tony.
That's a good name.
He's just a really good friend of mine. But he's always wanted to do this, and him and I were talking. And so I come from a pretty extensive acting background. It's really it comes quite naturally to me at this point. But I'm always the one acting in my own stuff. So I think that was like another part of the challenge was like, let's truly give the main character reins to somebody else. Let's put the spotlight on someone else. And
Yeah.
honestly, Tony just has that look to him, like that's all real facial hair. Like, he had the look I was going for 100%. Yeah, I've known him for about 10 years. Fun fact, him and I have the same birthday. So we're like birthday twins.
Yeah.
And yeah, this was basically his first major role. But I guarantee you that we will be seeing more of him for sure in the
And I
future.
also want to point out that your birthday is the same day as my mom. You have the same
Wow,
part.
that's crazy.
So,
There you
I just know that
go.
because of Film Freeway, right? So there you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's
You get
awesome.
this information as you know, right? So
Yeah, well, I will make sure in my head to wish her a happy birthday next time it's my birthday.
so but 99 and then so but you have Back to the Future behind you and you reference Star Wars in your
Yeah.
film. So you're like, dare I say, kind of an old school guy. You're like going back to the past, I guess.
Oh yeah, man. Like music wise too. My favorite band is Nirvana. Like and like they always will be. You know, like
But well,
I
that's
you
my
know,
era right there. I was a teenager,
right
so
right
yeah.
on. Yeah. Yeah. I got a bunch of stories about that band from like my parents because my parents are huge music heads. They are like very ingrained into the music industry here in Chicago. So growing up, it was like kind of impossible for me to like listen to anything else than like the Ramones and like Misfits, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like
Yeah.
so that definitely transcended into film 110%. Yeah, I think like movies are awesome now. Like people are still making phenomenal films. But there was a charm there, especially in the 80s, that I think stemmed from we call it creative constraints, right? Like when you cannot just make anything in your room, like how do you figure it out? I think that's why I have so much love for Star Wars. I would love to dive more into like miniatures, that sort of thing, because
Yeah.
that's like another aspect of it that I just like truly I understand how it works, but I think like you really don't know how to do it until you do it in practice. And I still like when I just conceptualize it, I'm like, that's so incredible and so ingenious to like figure out you can get this little model, put it in front of like a screen, and then like adjust camera exposures because you're filming it on film. Like it's just like a whole nother world that I think when you dive into that, you get such a new appreciation for it, especially.
But you're talking about the first three Star Wars films, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yes,
Because
yes.
then everything
Not
else is the newer ones are all kind of CGI and yeah.
at that point, yeah. Compositing, like computer software compositing was there. So like they could rely on it pretty heavily for sure. Yeah. But like, yeah, back in the like well, I think New Hope came out in 77.
Yeah.
So like, when you're trying to make a movie in like the 70s and 80s, like it's all what you can do in camera is like what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And that sort of
Well,
idea.
it's well documented, but they created the miniatures because they had to because they didn't
Yeah.
have much to work with when the film, so they were creating it. They were creating it as they went. So he brought these all these smart guys from the
Yeah.
70s, Lucas
Yeah.
in, and they basically had to figure out how to make the film, right? How to do this. So
Right. Yeah.
because they didn't
That's
have a
true.
film, right? Like basically they were trying to patch up the context of like say they're inside the Millennium Falcon to the context of outside. They needed that context, and they didn't have it because it was all a disaster. So they had to create it in post. So
Right. No, yeah, no, exactly. Filling in those gaps is like the biggest challenge, I think, when like making a film. Because you can tell yourself, okay, we're gonna be here, we're gonna be here, but how do you creatively transition from like each and then also convince the audience the entire time that they're in this world? I think that's where sci-fi also like adds another level to it,
yeah,
where yeah, if you're making sort of a like a coming of age story or something like that, unless you want it to be like historic or like based in a different time, you can do it today. You can film it at a coffee shop and it works. But when you're doing sci-fi, like especially Star Wars, like I'll admit I wanted to have like alien kind of creatures in this too. Maybe
yeah,
when we do the next one and we have like a bigger budget. But yeah, that's like another part of it that I love, where it's putting someone in like a physical costume, and that's like an interesting thing about visual effects as well. They do it in Mandalorian, where the Baby Yoda like is like a physical puppet, to kind of like one pay homage to the original Yoda, but also like it like tricks your brain when you're watching it that like even though it's not like a real sentient being because you can tell it's a real physical thing,
yeah,
like you're like you totally pacify, we're like yep, like that's like a real thing and like it works compared to like Jar Jar Binks, right? Like in like the prequels when you're seeing him run around flop around, it kind
yeah.
of takes you out of it just for
No,
just for
no, it's a great point about the emotional context, right? Because it's like
yeah.
you have like it's funny because if people are watching this on YouTube, you have a green screen to over one shoulder, but then you have Back to the Future over the other shoulder. And Back to the Future is it's all about there's no special effects really in that film, right?
Yeah,
And so
no,
basically, except for like maybe the time travel push, right? But that's very basic. But in terms of it's all about the story. What I'm trying to say, it's like it's all about
yeah,
kind of like following you care about these characters and that in Back to the Future because that's the storytelling aspect, right? Whereas like in like you're talking about Mandalorian, there's an emotional kind of feeling. We get into the crux where like that's the flaws of the prequels of the Star Wars, where like it's all kind of like it doesn't we don't care about Jar Jar, right?
Right, yeah. We just don't, yeah. No, and that's what's surreal to me about Back to the Future. It'll always be my favorite movie, and I feel like every time I watch it, I find different reasons why. But like you're so right when you say that, like it's a kind of a weird story. And I was talking to a friend actually recently about this, about how we never questioned why Marty McFly, this like cool 17-year-old skater kid, is his best friends with this like old mad scientist
Yeah,
in
there's
the
something
area.
creepy about that. Yeah,
There is, but we also just completely accept it because of how charismatic their relationship is.
yeah,
How immediately when, oh man, yeah, I can talk about this movie forever. Like immediately when they like when you first see them talking to each other, they establish that there's this pre-existing relationship between them, and it just works. You're like, oh, like I see their dynamic and I like it. And I think also what's so good about that premise is even if you're not really into sci-fi, even if you're not even like a fan of the 50s or something, the whole premise of going back into the future and almost ruining the fact that you exist is like such a relatable, sort of like plot line where I feel like where anyone can watch it and think like, wait, like what would I do if I found myself in this situation? And I think that's like for me, the biggest thing that I'm thinking about when I'm like making something is like when someone's watching something, like how can they connect to it? I feel like that's the
yeah.
first step. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. And
Well,
Robert's always does
not
that
to
very well.
hammer home, but the interesting thing about that film, Back to the Future, is that everybody in the film changes except for Marty, right? So the main
Right.
character
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
change, which is contrary to what natural storytelling is, right? There's usually an arc of the main character, but Marty's just
Wow. I
reacting to
never
the
thought about that.
situation.
That's surreal.
Yeah,
Holy
Marty's
crap.
just reacting to situations that occur to him. But everybody, even Doc changes a lot, right? Like Doc changes his
Yeah.
mind about spoiler alert, about getting killed. His parents
Yeah.
obviously change, right? Within the twist in the end, right?
Hmm.
So everybody, yeah, everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, even the
Yeah.
antagonist changes, right? Biff. So,
Yeah. Oh man.
but Marty remains the same in the new present, I guess, right?
He does. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And I guess he does have some like development throughout the story, but I guess that's like not really the point. The point is to like it's like a spectacle to watch him go through this journey for sure. And then
Yeah,
that's interesting because I just you saying that's making me think about Nova because that was my whole intention with Nova was like I wanted to tell this like circular
yeah.
story. I love bookmark sort of like beginning and endings for films. And so like that was like the main goal there was like how do we show where this character is now, show this mission how it goes, and then show that, also like the life of a bounty hunter, you wake up and you go to sleep pretty much in the same state that you were in, but having done your job, whatever it was. Yeah, but having
So,
changed.
not to like, basically, there's a good book. We don't need roads. The making of Back to the Future. If you ever make sure. I know your generation doesn't like to read much, but I'm totally kidding.
I do like I
But
have like a bunch of books over here. I actually do
that's what
like
I'm
to
saying. I'm generalizing.
read.
I'm being a jerk, basically. But it's
Nah,
a
it's
really
fine.
good book. We don't need roads.
Oh
The
yeah.
making of Back to the Future, and there's a lot of nuggets of storytelling in the making of that film. So, well,
It
because they
sounds
had to change
familiar.
the actor, and
Right.
yeah, so it's a must read if you ever it'll take you a couple days to read it. So,
Oh yeah. Okay, I'm gonna
or listen
add
to
some.
it on Audible with like I did. So.
Oh yeah. That's actually a really good
Yeah.
idea.
But
Yeah.
anyways, so basically, so what are you up to? What are you doing now? What are you up to now? You're gonna make more films, I'm assuming?
Yeah, yeah. So the goal right now, I'm like not taking a break from it, but more so just kind of like speculating the next couple of scripts that we want to do. Tony, the lead actor in Nova, is also like one of my like writing partners. So him and I want to do like a little horror short, I think, next. We want to do something with a lot more special effects, not so much like visual effects like post-production, but like puppets and like blood, all that kind of stuff on
Mhm.
set. Our buddy owns a farm out here in Illinois, so we were thinking about maybe trying to like film something there. But my parents also own two different businesses here in Chicago, a coffee shop, which Nova was filmed at quite a bit, and a bar. So we've also been thinking about trying to base something in those locations.
That's
But
smart.
yeah, yeah. So, but basically, the general idea for it would be like purgatory. We want to tell this story about a character who I thought it would be cool if they're like waiting in like a doctor's office or something. And then after a while, you start to realize they're not being taken care of, but they're being trapped there. And we kind of like see like how that kind of like spans out. I love like Twilight Zone too. So like I'm always thinking in like that realm of like how do we tell this weird like character biopic of just
Yeah.
yeah. But honestly, besides that, I'm doing a lot of like animating right now, 2D and 3D. I've always wanted to like make my own like not like kids show, but like I love shows like Adventure Time and like The Last Airbender, shows that can like transcend ages
Mhm.
but take place in that medium. So I'm like working on a pilot right now for this like dark fantasy series that I have in mind that I'm like cooking up. So yeah, I'm trying to stay busy for sure. But we're hoping to film this next one next month, I think is the goal. So hopefully that happens.
So what do your parents think about your filmmaking Progress.
Oh, they've been stoked about it. It's funny. I mean, like I said, they were there when I was like 8 years old, just making really silly home videos with my friends, us like being superheroes and stuff. And they've always been really supportive of it. I think, my mom, I think she like at one point wanted me to like be a musician, and I play music, but not as often as I'm like doing all this stuff. Bless you.
Sorry about
But
that.
we actually had a really cool we did like a physical screening a week before it actually officially came out at the coffee shop.
Yeah.
That was really fun. Yeah, we set up a projector and just invited like a bunch of my friends and everyone who was in it. And we just kind of hung out and watched it, and it was really cool. Yeah. No, they've been really stoked about it, which is exciting, because I feel like before Nova came out, I've done this sort of thing, but never like to this level. I will 100% confirm that Nova is the most amount of time and energy and money that I've spent on anything. Um, and to see it kind of actually be made and to have it be enjoyed and like to have it like truly like connect with people, I think is like the biggest win that I could even ask for. So
Well, you're on your way as a filmmaker. There's some really interesting nuggets in the film. Tone
thanks, man.
wise, it's we see we you got us into the future. We recognize that this is where we already created that world, but it also made us laugh at the same time, which is not easy to do.
Thanks, man. Yeah, no, I appreciate
In
that.
your categories as well. So
Yeah,
so your
yeah, he
cat just
does. He's so excited about this interview that he can't stop messing around with stuff.
oh my God. I can if I had a quarter for every time someone like a cat joined a podcast. I don't know why filmmakers have cats. I don't know what that why that
Yeah, so
is.
like, we're a cat breed, I guess.
Yeah, I get it must be. It's so
So
funny.
funny.
Because cats are always the villains in the films, right? The dogs are the heroes, the cats are the villains. So I don't know.
It's true. I do want to put him in something, maybe when he's a little bit older. He's like 4 months old, so
Oh, there you
he's a
go.
baby.
Well, let's talk again when you make your next film. I think it's a great idea for that horror, and it's like you can see it's manageable. It can really get done, and yeah,
Yeah.
and keep going. So
Thank
you
you,
can
man. I
see
really
why
appreciate
you
it.
get an actor. You got a good screen presence, right? Too, right? So
Thanks. Yeah, I thought it was kind of funny. People who I knew when they watched it, they were like, "Are you in it too?" And I was like, "Yeah." Like I'm Doc. They were like, "Wait, that was you?" And I'm
yeah,
like, "Yeah, I guess you didn't recognize me. I guess that's good." But
that's good.
I thought it was gonna be like an immediate thing for people. They're like, "Oh, he is in it." But so thanks.
All right, man. Let's talk. Let's talk again soon. Congratulations on the film.
Absolutely. Thank you, man. Nice meeting you, Matthew.